In the last chapters, sections, we were talking about the steppe peoples, the Mongolians, and the Turkic peoples. And I already started introducing us to the idea of the Ottomans and the Ottoman Empire. And um, this section, I think, will kind of help see where the groundwork is laid within the legacy of Islamic empires, and also might help connect some of the. It might make sense of some of the current conflicts, and be more clear to see the power plays that were taking place between Shiites and Sunnis in something that is more concrete. And as we'll see when it comes to the Ottoman Empire and the Safavids' competition for power, the kind of Shiite-Sunni tensions there, and looking at the way Iran and, let's say, Saudi Arabia often have proxy wars with each other now, it helps give a little insight into some of this dynamic. One shouldn't make the parallels too literally, but it will help clarify. And with the Mughal Empire, it will help explain some of the background to the tensions that have led to the breakoff of Pakistan from India and the separation of Pakistan as a country from India, and the tensions with Muslims and Hindus that unfortunately remain within India itself. And briefly, I'll be able to talk a little bit about Sikhs, or Punjabi people. So this will all kind of, hopefully, while it's still a lot of information, will be found to be applicable in modern times for what you're seeing now. Okay, so Tamerlane, or the Conquest of Tamerlane. He was born into a Muslim Turkish family in Central Asia, and his father claimed to be a descendant of Genghis Khan. Um, and basically, he conquered much of Persia, Baghdad, and went into Russia and India, and he established his capital in Samarkand in the 14th century. He died at 69 of alcohol poisoning. Um, Muslims aren't supposed to drink alcohol. He died of alcohol poisoning. But alcohol is very common as a habit in Central Asia. And so again, I kind of want to point out, that these historical figures, we should never be boxed into, and I've said this in a lot of my class, to ideology, and be more focused on actuality. In other words, there's so many different factors that make up, when we call this an Islamic empire or Muslim conquest, what is the reason of religion? What cultural factors come into play that are more relevant as opposed to others? In any case, you may not even know Tamerlane as he's known, or Timurlenk, but his legacy is very powerful in certain parts of the world. I'm not going to focus on him as much as some of the other discussions in the section. But if you see, look at this part of the world here. Here's the Golden Horde, if you remember this. And then we have the Delhi Sultanate of India, the Khanate of Jagadai, and then the Ottoman Empire, and then the Mamluk Empire. So, and here's Arabia. These are all Muslim, but they're also very different culturally, okay, in many aspects as well. Now, for whatever we could say about all this, I think the architecture here, which is now Uzbekistan, is quite amazing to just look at. Every culture leaves behind a legacy that has something memorable, and I think architecture, in this case, I happen to be a great fan of Islamic architecture. I mean, look at this. Wow. And so, as a side note, I think I've mentioned this before too, that despite the fact that Islam generally has a prohibition against pictorial art. As I've pointed out, that there are many examples of pictorial art within the Islamic world. But having said that, there's more, and because of that prohibition that is officially there, we generally don't see that as much pictorial art. Like, let's say with the Renaissance, or Europe has a tremendous amount of pictorial art from all periods, in the Christian West and in the Christian East. In the Islamic world, it's far, far less. But what they did is they concentrated on geometric patterns, architecture, and calligraphy. And so, you have here, I mean, the Quran being written very beautifully. You have these geometric patterns. Look at the door, even. Nothing is not being given a tremendous amount of detail. So anyhow, that's something that you'll notice. Okay, so history meets the present. I basically found this on a website, and that's why I thought I would put this up. And so it says in here, killing civilians means terrorism, the same for attacking our religion. Islam means for us terrorism. Freedom does not mean attacking Islam. If there's an attack to our religion and the Holy Prophet, we will make you pay for it. And then it says speed and Tamerlane. So here's somebody, I mean, you get the message, I think. I have Muslim friends that would disagree to the exact context of that, but I'm just simply showing that while this name may not mean as much to us in the West, and his militancy and his power to some in other parts of the world actually is a testimony to strength, that resistance against the West and any attack on Islam. But so that's all I'm going to say on him. That was kind of a choppy lecture. I just kind of wanted to introduce the name, bring up the places, and you'll have been exposed to him a little bit in the reading as well. I now want to focus on the Ottoman Empire, which I did have us do an introduction to in a video. And the Ottoman Empire is really significant to have an understanding of. And I felt for myself, as I went back into upper division history when I was finishing up my bachelor's, that the Ottoman Empire, I mean, not understanding the Ottoman Empire's legacy would be like not understanding the Soviet Union's legacy in the West. And I'm not even trying to compare them and say, like, as if they're the bad guy and the Soviet Union's a bad guy. I'm not even actually getting into the bad guy, good guy thing. What I mean, though, is that the Soviet Union in the Cold War years was everything in which the context of U.S. foreign policy was addressing, for better or for worse. And much of the history of the Ottoman Empire in the West was the same way. In a sense, the Ottoman Empire was at the Europeans' gate, just like the Soviet Union. And just like the Soviet Union, both cultures had interacted with each other and had a lot of influence on each other, and both were resistant to try to admit so. But you can't talk about the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th century and on, and not address and know about Western Europe and not know about the Ottoman Empire. Just like you couldn't know about modern times if you didn't know something about the Soviet Union, okay? And the context and its influence and so on. So, having said that, the Ottoman Turks come from the House of Osman. That's what it comes from. It's the House of Osman. And in the late 13th century, a Turkic group led by him arrived in Anatolia, granted lands by Seljuks, remember them, and converted to Islam. The Seljuk state collapses, and the Mongols withdrew. And so what this meant was that the Ottomans take their place in power and influence. So this kind of bridges that link from the last lecture of the Turkic, the Seljuks we talked about, and the Mongols, and then the coming of the Ottomans. Okay, and in a sense, this is kind of, I feel like it's fair to say, like if you studied Western civilization, what gets really confusion between like the Vandals and the Visigoths and the Saxons and the Anglo-Saxons and all these Germanic tribes and these various people that kind of come from the same place. They're kind of the same, they're kind of not, and it gets a little bit confusing. And so that's what we kind of end with all these Turkic peoples and the Mongols, and then we get something really concrete that I think is it's easier over history to pin down, and we have the Ottoman Empire, okay, rising. And so I'm going to end that here, and I'll move on to the next lecture.